Let me just pick up on this death penalty point first of all, though, with you, Alex. Do you think, because we read cases like this, people now start saying time for the death penalty conversation, would you be in favour of either the conversation, maybe perhaps a referendum, and then an outcome, perhaps of a return to capital punishment?
No, I wouldn't. And the case can be as bad as this, which is as bad as it gets, and I'm still not in favour of a return to the death penalty.
Really?
Yeah. I don't think the state should kill people.
OK, we'll come back and we'll unpick that in a second. But, Peter, your thoughts?
Oh, I've been arguing for the death penalty for decades. I have seen in my life 2 executions, and it hasn't altered my view that the death penalty is a vital weapon in the hands of the justice system to protect the innocent against the evil and the violent. Having made that point absolutely clear, that it's something I would consider, I think we have to be extremely careful about it under current circumstances. At the moment, we're all talking about Lucy Letby. But 2 weeks ago, we were talking about Andrew Malkinson, a man who was convicted by a jury under the same justice system as this convicted Lucy Letby of a horrible crime of rape, and who was treated after his conviction with similar. I've looked it up. In fact, the reporter from the Manchester Evening News who covered the trial has written a fascinating article about how it was when the jury verdict was first reached, and the whole attitude everybody had towards Mr. Malkinson at the time, dismissing him as a violent and unforgivable rapist. Now we know. Yes. That justice system completely failed.
But we know that because of DNA. We know that the DNA actually proved that ultimately he was innocent. Yes, but
you would have executed him by the time that DNA had come to light.
I wouldn't have personally had him as a candidate for it.
One would have, the state would have executed him had we had the death penalty for that sort of offence well before such exonerating evidence came to light. I did a criminal cases, a criminal...
Because you're a barrister, I just want to make that clear as well for people that might not be familiar with that.
I did a criminal case review commission case of a serious sexual assault. It wasn't rape. My client had spent some years in prison, and exonerating evidence emerged later. He was desperate to have his name cleared. He was already, unlike Malkinson, he was already out of prison. He was desperate to have his name cleared. From time to time, such things do happen. But there are great injustices. There's very little you can do to restore to somebody the life that they have lost, but you certainly can't do it if you've killed them.
It's not just that, though. I think my impression is that both the police and the prosecution service and the justice system in this country are deteriorating quite fast. They simply are not of the standard which I would feel able to trust with a decision like sentencing somebody to death. They say, I'm very much in favour of it, but people will always turn around and say, well, but you can't do it, what if there was a mistake? And I would say, actually, if you take serious precautions, and if you run your justice system properly, the chances of a mistake are very small. And in any case, in many other ways, and Alex says the state shouldn't kill, the state kills all the time. The state kills when it employs and deploys an army, an air force, and a navy. The state kills when it licenses the current transport system which we have, which guarantees each year to kill hundreds of totally innocent people needlessly.
Come on.
And the other thing is that every 2 or 3, I think, 2 convicted murderers who have been released from prison kill again.
Reoffend, yeah.
Every 3 years in this country. You know, they are deaths of innocent people. They are the result of a policy, a generally humane policy of releasing some people early. It's simply not possible to devise a policy in which every conceivable chance of an innocent person being killed is eliminated, and it would be hypocritical of us to pretend that's what our concern was. In this case, though, I think the Malkinson case shows that both in the police and in the prosecution service and in the appeal system, there is a very, very serious set of flaws which would make it extremely difficult for us to support the death penalty against anybody at the moment.
When the state kills people in the course of armed combat, fighting aggressors, the king's enemies abroad, it does so because we are defending our nation in the course of mortal combat. It's very different to in cold blood, calculatedly taking a life in the justice system. And equally, to compare it to our transport system is, no offence, facile, because it's not the intent of the transport system for a moment to execute somebody, whereas plainly if you put a noose around their neck or inject lethal toxins into their vein, it is.
Let me answer those 2 points. First of all, quite a lot of killing in wars is pretty cold-blooded, especially when we dropped bombs on Serbia a few years ago and killed the make-up lady at Serbian TV in Belgrade. That was pretty cold-blooded, and it was very much approved of by liberal-minded persons in this country. The other thing is that we maintain armed services to kill as a deterrent to protect ourselves from external attack. We maintained, when we did, the death penalty to defend ourselves against internal attack from people who weren't prepared to respect human life.
If one concedes...
And on the issue of road deaths, we know it is statistical certainty that the transport policy which this country has agreed on will kill hundreds of innocent people.
But it's not its intention.
There is absolutely no way in which that cannot be...
It's absurd.
I didn't interrupt you. There is no way in which that cannot be described as intentional. We know it's going to happen, and yet we still do.
Right, I don't quite know how I've got onto road traffic accidents.
Neither do I.
Well, because it's relevant.
Let me ask you a question.
No, it isn't.
Let me ask you a question. Because I am in favour of the death penalty for the most hideous of crimes. I wouldn't have, the Malkinson case, I wouldn't have had him as a potential candidate for it. But if someone is in favour of the death penalty, i.e. you've just said you are, what would be the reason? Is it for punishment? Is it to deter future crimes? Is it to save money of incarceration? What's the driver?
The fundamental driver is deterrence. If you happen to take a Christian position, there is an argument that it is a preferable way of dealing with heinous crime than locking people up for the rest of their lives.
Deterrent, is that fair?
I'm not generally addressing Christian audiences, so I won't go into that, but I do have a Christian reason for supporting it. But no, the simple practical reason is the deterrence, particularly of armed crime. And of the carrying of weapons, guns and knives by criminals. There's evidence from the suspensions of the death penalty in this country before it was abolished, which suggests very strongly that it's effective in that way. It changes the behaviour of criminals. And that is the biggest argument in its favour.
Yes.
Final word to you on this.
It may deter career criminals who used to search one another before going on robberies to make sure they didn't have lethal weapons. That is so that they wouldn't incur the death penalty. That is true. The notion it would have deterred Lucy Letby, I think, is a very strange one to argue, although you weren't directly maintaining that. We've come a long way from talking about Lucy Letby here. The traffic thing, honestly, to my mind, couldn't be more irrelevant. It wasn't not the purpose of our transport system for a moment to kill people. And only because you've mentioned it. Michelle, these things don't normally get talked about on television, but you're in the unlikely or unusual, I suppose, circumstance of having two Christians on a panel who couldn't reach more different perspectives. Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord, is my perspective. But moreover, I can't understand why we would say the state should be taking lives in these circumstances. To deter people, a whole life tariff will do that.